Welcome to Fave podcast episode number 25, in which I interview friends and family members and colleagues and talk about their life's background, talk about five topics of mutual interest, and we share a couple of stories. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by my guest, Marc Solomon. Marc is a knowledge manager at the Hartford, who I've known for a long time virtually, and I think we've probably met in person a few times, but mostly known through our profession of knowledge management. So, Marc, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stan. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be somewhere inside your very rich social network. You are definitely a force, not just of bringing people together, but gravitation itself.
Well, let's get into that. Let's talk about your background. When and where were you born?
I was born on the North Shore of Long Island in the winter of 1962. My mom says, because they didn't release moms from the hospital as quite as quickly as they do now, that we were watching John Glenn circle the planet, and we were still in the hospital. Um, I spent pretty much my growing up on Long Island with a certain solemn vow that I would not live my adult life on Long Island, and I do miss the beaches. I do have a passing respect for what Robert Moses did to open up beaches to the public, but I don't miss the congestion. And and I got to say, there's a lot to be said for creating a life that's somewhat detached from where you start out. I find a lot of value in that.
What's your ancestry?
I believe it's mostly Eastern European. I know of all the countries of the world, um, I am more Polish than anything else that's coming from both bloodlines. There's some Prussian, there's some Russian. Uh, it's definitely on the Fiddler on the Roof side of the DNA
Hmm.
train, and so there's always that sense of connection. I have given up on, and we're going to talk about food to a great extent here. I no longer eat cow, Stan. I don't eat pig, but I do eat a mean corned beef sandwich. That is my one exception.
So that's a version of cow that you will tolerate.
Jewish deli is inscribed
Okay,
as don't listen to what Mark says about Long Island. Just order him a very hefty corned beef sandwich.
got it. Um, and after you left Long Island, where have you lived since?
I've lived in well, not every. I've lived in Queens. I've lived in Manhattan. I've lived in Brooklyn. I've lived in Burnsville, North Carolina, 40 minutes north of Asheville. And I've lived in Boston. I've lived in Cambridge. I've lived in Belmont on the eastern Massachusetts side. I originally sprung out of my Long Island cage coming up to where I live now, which is in the beautiful splendor of Western Massachusetts, which is picture postcard and very difficult to earn a living in. So, one of the prevailing themes of my life is rarely does Mark live close to his job. So that'll become a story later on. But I'm very, very blessed that I can live in the place of my choosing, and I can still work for a fairly stable uh, and actually quite um, supportive corporation. I don't usually those two words don't necessarily come together, right? But I have had that luxury and that grace. So I've been working at the Hartford Insurance Company for the past 11 years, and I will tell you that you could fit probably about 6 or 7 knowledge management jobs into that sandwich of the duration of all those other things that I did while I was living in Eastern Mass and in New York City. So very happy to have landed here. Very happy to have tried so many things, Stan, and that includes marriages. I've tried four of them, and I got it right the fourth time.
Well,
So
good.
not only do I work for this great company, live where I want, I have the woman of my dreams, and she's there in daylight. She's there in the dark. She's the person who picked me up at the train station when I came home from KM World at 12:46 a.m. in Springfield. You don't, no one deserves that, and I get that.
Well, congratulations to. What town do you live in?
I live in Hadley. That too is a bit of good fortune because our taxes are low. We live like Republicans, and we acculturate like Democrats. So it's very lefty. We've got all the colleges sprinkled across the chasm. We've got UMass Amherst down the block from us. I just did fundraising this week for my alma mater, which is Hampshire College. So a sense of kinship, a sense of connection to the local community.
Who was in your family when you were growing up?
My two best friends till the age of 7 were my mom and my dad. Um, my big aspiration was one day I would become an adult. Uh, I always knew what to do with my time. If I was sick and home from school, I would start writing stories about the New York Mets and how 1969 just was going to endure for the rest of human history. Like that's what I did when I was 5 and 6. Um, so I started off reading newspapers, is how I learned how to read. If you're going to ask me questions about what books I have read, I will tell you there are two organs fighting against that. One is my eyesight, and two is my brain has been completely reshaped, if not permanently misshapen, by reading off of screens. So, I'm getting that out of the way. I don't have any juicy reads for the audience. I will tell you that my wife and I read Damon Copperhead, which was on everybody's got to read list. It took us over a year to get the whole book done. Um, are we slow readers? Well, we like to read out loud to each other, so that is a pleasure as well. You were asking who are my
Who was
who
in
did
your
I grow up
family?
with? Yeah, so my parents split when I was 7, um, and um, my mom remarried a difficult guy. He basically his difficulty forced me to be less introverted and less like in my world and more out in the world. And so I got to give him thanks for that. And that's where I started to have pals. I still have the same reunion buddies. We meet every year, and we go back to fourth grade. There's 6 of us, so we are famously friendly. And I do compilation music. I do narratives of everybody's life, and I talk to ChatGPT and I create liner notes, and it's a thing, Stan. I have this. I hate to get all KM on you, but I've got a spreadsheet of all the songs from all the compilations, and it's sort of our musical knitting. You can always reference how many times a band has ended up in that collection and what was on it, and it's just a great reference.
So, did you have any siblings?
I have a couple. Well, I have siblings of all varieties. I have
Okay.
a biological sibling. How's that for romantic? In fact, he and I were on a Zoom earlier today interviewing our cousin, Michael Pollan, the food author and philosopher and teacher of science and journalism at UC Berkeley. You'll never run out of things to say about Michael. So Eric and I are very close. Eric has 3 Met fan triplets. They all came out at once. They can't help that they're Met fans, and and so other siblings. I have a half sister, Haley, who's a doctor in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Her husband, Jared, hosts his own podcast, which is a lot of dishing about family stuff, but he does it in such a um, congenial way and such a open, this is what it is, I'm just letting you know. And there's always just information. It's never like too edgy or too uh, did you have to say that to an audience, Jared? So um, I'm sure when you have family members on, this must be a part of your radar. But Jared, just he's a good, talkative, engaging host. So that's the half sibling, and then I have a stepbrother. I have a stepbrother named Scott who lives in Tolland, Connecticut, and the thing you should know about Scott is he would send self-addressed stamped envelopes to retired baseball players, and they unreservedly sign the baseball cards and send them back. So who knew? I mean, but there are so many retired baseball players that to you and I, we our hearts would stop if we saw them
Yeah.
at a used car dealership. Like
Yeah.
we would really, that would rock our world. And but these players, they just go off on their civilian lives, and to get that recognition, they send the cards back.
Yeah. Did you have any extended family living near you when you were growing up?
I did. That's a great question. I had my mom's parents living about 10 minutes away. If one of us missed the bus, they would come pick us up and bring us in. They were a really wonderful sort of safety blanket for Eric and me because it wasn't that comfortable at home. And the other thing you should know about my grandfather and my cousin Michael, who also has the same grandfather, reminded me Papa Bob never had an ill feeling about any person he met, which was very helpful. He was a liquor salesman. So he just he would meet shadowy people who didn't report their taxes or had uh, clientele that you wouldn't normally want to make known to law enforcement in the back of whatever. And he would be selling them Seagrams and Johnny Walker. And he was just the most innocent, doesn't sound right. It sounds like he was gullible. He wasn't. But he just gave his fellow man the benefit of the doubt. And he walked in that direction and he never had a false step. I will tell you, and I just remembered this after talking to Michael. Michael has a famous sister, Tracy Pollan, who's married to Michael J. Fox.
Right.
Tracy Pollan, before she became a mom and did more of the sort of the keeping the family together mode, she had her own film career. And she ended up playing a protagonist. I couldn't tell you the name of the film. Melanie Griffith was the star. My grandfather saw that movie and he was pain stricken because when he watched a TV show and Cannon or Kojak were chasing the bad guys, my grandfather was in the front seat of that chase car with the good guys.
Yeah.
So when his lovely, beautiful, uh, uh, just a very glamorous member of our family to be playing the bad guy, I don't think he got over that.
What did your parents do?
Okay, so my dad is the engineer, and it's interesting. Until I got to the Hartford stand, in all my CAM travels, I worked alongside engineers. I guess you could say I do today. They're just all software engineers. So when I did operations consulting at PRTM, those guys were all they weren't the corner office. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't McKinsey. It wasn't the big four. It was the operations end of it. So it was the the VP of engineering was the sort of that the breadbasket, the sort of the winning ticket. Um, and I always just really appreciated how engineers are dispassionate, how they break problems down, how they end up reusing bits and pieces of them, but it's never the same exact concoction in the next client. That was always fascinating to me, and that's basically where I cut my teeth on knowledge management was all through the engineering trade. My mom was an artist, and my mom, very much like her dad, had this sort of uh, guilelessness about her. Um, she marketed herself at a time when a woman artist really had their work cut out. In fact, part of the reason my parents split is because my dad had a very tidy Polish mom who was used to cleaning up after everybody. And my mom would put down her charcoals and her pastels and some of her oils, and maybe she would put some of them away before her next project. Not a good fit. So I actually have the only painting she ever created with the last name Solomon signed as her name. Otherwise, she just used Pollen, her maiden name.
Hmm.
And so the other story of my mom is that yes, she was somewhat successful. I say measured in that she would sell a big ticket piece, but not enough to quit her day job, kind of a thing. After her second marriage went south with the difficult stepfather, she basically packed her life into her car and she drove from Boca Raton, Florida, and she was going to go as far west as she could get. She ended up with a flat tire in this one horse town stand called Blanding, Utah, about 70 miles north of Monument Valley. So we're talking about mesas, we're talking about just immaculate moonscape kinds of rock formations and buttes. And you visited you if you haven't visited Utah, yeah.
Yeah.
So she projected a life there during that flat tire. I guess she took the time she had available and she went walking into the one place that she could future set as her her hub, as her ticket to this this beatific vista of a place where she could paint oils and really dwell within her impressionist roots. Monet was her North Star, but she wanted to take Gaverny. She wanted to take the flowery petals of those gardens, and then just go to town on these mountains. So anyway, she ends up going into the local community college. There's no Chinese food. There might be one pizzeria. It's a one horse town. She ends up talking to the dean and she talks up the idea that these guys are all left brain. It's all STEM stuff. It's all career, vocation, straight track, math and science. You need an art program, Buster. And a couple of years later, the money came in. She had already been teaching, she had already settled there, and she started their art program. And the reason my brother and I are collaborating is because we have a scholarship fund for her. And it's a very conservative fund. It's run by the Mormons, not for nothing, through the University of Utah, and that is now part of the network that this community college is in. So our next chapter is to create an immersion program for these kids who are under-resourced. They've never been on a bus, forget about a plane, and they're just being recognized for having curiosity and energy and this bigger potential. So we want to get them on a plane. We want to get them into an art center. We want to get them to the museum, to the artists, give them that bigger picture, regardless of whatever their track in life is going to be, it will be informed by this very career shaping trip. So that's what we were having Michael as sort of the celebrity member of the family on earlier talking about, is the promise of this immersion program as part of that scholarship that we've been funding. So we're very excited about that. I don't know if that counted for a story, but
Well,
it's hard not to tell her story.
you said your mom, in addition to being an artist, had a day job. What was that?
Oh, she was an art teacher.
Okay.
When we were growing up, she taught elementary level, she taught college level. She basically figured out where the jobs were. And at a certain point, I was just about to leave for Hampshire in the fall of 1980, where she quit her job to do the full time. She really wanted to hit the pedal to the metal. And I still remember my grandmother being like, not when your son's going to college. But, my mother, I guess I'm a little bit like her. She has tried everything, sometimes once and sometimes more so.
And did she remain in Utah?
She did. She stayed in Utah till the end. She, unfortunately, she has or had um, a DNA predisposition, happens to Eastern European women. Um, uh, it's called the HER2 gene, I believe, and she contracted breast cancer. She was treated at the Huntsman Institute in Salt Lake City. We just received so much warmth and so much affection and resources from the Mormon community while we were there. Um, all of the sick days from all of her colleagues down in Blanding were all donated to her, so she continued to get paid for pretty much the course of an entire year. I mean,
Mm,
that's the kind of community that she
yeah,
met when she was in Utah.
yeah. So when you were young, what did you like to do?
I like to fantasize that my baseball team won every game, and my dad was hitting third in the order, and I was hitting cleanup. And we were both about 6'2", 195 pounds. Um, so I told you about the disillusionment my grandfather had when Tracy took that role. I was equally disillusioned to find out that my father was 5'9", and I did not outgrow him. So I had a rich interior life. Uh, I was everything that I gravitated towards was through sports. I was definitely an all seasonal sports guy. I would read into a tape recorder from the sports pages. My friends and I would create fake ads to put in to break up the four sports we were following. I never played organized sports though. I was a very hard kid to tackle. We would play uh, we would play tackle football or touch football without the flag, same thing. Um, and then we would do these non-competitive games of choosing sides, but the teams were mostly theater people. So you can imagine just how competitive that was. So it was more about quoting Shakespeare about whether the ball was foul or the foul was fair. It was not your alpha male kind of competition.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
The first thing I ever wanted to be was a baseball player. I wanted to wear number 4. Ron Swoboda was my guy. Uh, the next thing I wanted to be was a sports writer. I thought I had a better shot at that. Um, and then after that, I figured I didn't know what words to use to describe this, Dan, but I knew that I had exceptional executive function. That doesn't mean I'm an executive. I've never come close. I would be a lousy executive. I cannot tell people what to do, but I can tell myself what to do pretty well. And as a direct result, I was enthralled with Hampshire College. Hampshire, for those who don't know, is one of those elective, immersive, independent experiences. And so you design your curriculum, you form a committee of professors, they oversee the work that you do. You do not get graded, but you receive a whole lot more feedback that leads you to places that a planned curriculum that's more structured and more formulaic could never touch. So it was very much in the discovery of the learning. And of course, I would end up in knowledge management. How could I not?
What did you study when you were in Hampshire? Did they actually have like a major?
So you don't have majors at Hampshire, Stan. You have the four schools are basically your liberal arts roundings. You've got your natural science, you've got your communication, your arts and humanities. Uh, you have the social sciences, and then you do something more elevated. Those four schools are foundational to your second project. And your second project, you get out into the world, you bolt on an internship on top of your classroom experience, and that's basically the sort of that summarization of your first 3 years. The last year is your division three, and that is the equivalent of a senior thesis. And that is wholly original work. And that is the dream that keeps returning as an adult. Like your division three is not quite done in the dream. It's a little bit like missing the bus, only it's
Mhm.
Hampshire. My division three, I enjoyed to the fullest. Um, I was able to break a Hampshire rule and collaborate on my Division three. Usually, Hampshire was a little bit orthodox, not in too many ways, but they really wanted a single Division three per student. And I decided to do an enormous project that required a partner, and we ended up doing, and it's on YouTube in all its glory, a documentary, a video documentary on the history of the New York City World's Fairs. So that was a cross section into Robert Moses, into the history of consumerism and advertising and history of New York and uh, basically corporate soft pedaling through the infomercial medium of animatronics that were just getting started, and then all the darn inventions that were seen for the first time. So when you look at history through that lens, through that test tube, through that time capsule, it's incredibly rich. And I milked that division three for all it was worth.
So you got your degree in something, right? What was your degree in?
So when I had to go about putting together a resume, when I got into the job market, it was a difficult transition. I didn't really have anything waiting in the wings, so I had to learn how to reinvent myself before I was even an invention. So I would call it history of technology, and the person would like, no, like they wanted the degree. So part of the limitation of going to such an unconventional school is if you don't have that Kevin Bacon degree of separation, you have to do the translating to the hiring manager. And clearly, I was overwhelmed by that challenge. I ended up working in a production house at the Film Center on West 45th Street in Manhattan. And that basically meant coiling a lot of cords and cleaning a lot of camera lenses. Jesse Jackson spoke at a sit in April of 1985 at Columbia, and I ended up double parking downstairs with the van, the equipment van, and it ended up being carted off by the city of New York when I went upstairs to bring the equipment back, and I ate that cost out of my paycheck. I mean that was what it was like to graduate from Hampshire. Um, the way I got my paces in and my gravity back was through the political realm. So I did an internship in Albany in the state capital of New York, a really good experience. I work for a super uh, wonderful man named Francis Portum, not lefty at all, really a Democrat in name only. And that's the turf. I mean, when you're dealing with suburban Buffalo, very Catholic, very traditional. Um, I ended up parking Fran's car once in the state capitol parking lot, which is about somewhere between an Ian Fleming novel and and one of those Doctor Doctor No spinoffs. Uh, I crashed his car into a beam, and I never heard about it again. He just took care of it. Figured, the kid is inexperienced, and I was a jerk for letting him drive my car. Like when you can make a mistake that bad and not have to pay
Hmm.
after having left the equipment in the van a
Yeah.
year earlier,
Yeah.
then film is not happening in this life.
Yeah.
But the politics did. I went to graduate school, the Graduate School of Political Management. It's now housed over at George Washington University. Um, I guess we were talking uh, in DC about about sports and about um, there's something about politics and sports that never mixed with me, Stan. Um, it just felt a little bit like all the fun and all the friendliness of the rivalry ended up being on the field and off the field. Like the off the field thing just never turned off. So I kind of turned off and I stopped subscribing to cable TV. Most of the sports scores I get even today are on my phone. I have dialed down my sports temperature dramatically. But when you and I talk about our memories and about your Stan Musial stuff, like my heart just leaps out of my chest because that to me is fresh. It will never go stale, and it will always be a renewable resource. I will always get energy from that. Um, but I sort of I left the relentless competition behind. It got a little nasty, and I did not have the skin for politics. I mean, I knew that even when I was going into the political management realm. Um, I ended up at a political consulting firm, and let me put it this way: it wasn't round the clock. It was literally not sleeping. I mean, literally, I did not go home like the next morning and take a cab in the afternoon. It was like you're on the clock, and I kind of returned the favor to my taskmaster. I ended up taking a speech that I had written for one of our clients. His name was Dick Ravitch. Um, he actually ran against Dinkins for mayor in '89, and I leaked that speech to the actual campaign manager. And I guess it was sort of a suicide pill I was swallowing. You do that when you're 26 and you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I really appreciate being able to go through all of my naivete and all of my scrapes uh, and it's nice to be a 63-year-old man talking to you saying I'm glad I did it. I have no appetite to ever do it again.
So you got a degree in political management from George Washington, and then what did you have in mind? You thought you were going to go into politics at that time, and then you switched?
I switched again. I ended up working, and this is how I got into the sort of the side door of KM, and it was through an outfit you've probably heard of called Find SVP. Yeah. So that was sort of the fast information food of research. And our customers tended to be manufacturers that wanted to get dirt on their competitors, count cars in parking lots. For stuff that was rapid turnaround, it would be more the ad agencies needing to pitch a business. And so they would have us go on TimeNet, which was 300 baud and $80 an hour just to be on the network. and they would have us go into Predicast databases and DMB, and we put in all our commands before we even got on the network, and it would just spit out, your plain hamburger and fries version of research. And so that was what I did after politics, and it really whetted my appetite for being able to organize that information. Um, and I got to test those chops when I worked for one of the Find SVP customers. They hired me as a consultant. I'm skipping a chapter, but I lived in, as I said, Burnsville, North Carolina, a dry county, Yancey County, the hills, Appalachia, the buckle of the Bible Belt. Um, I had convinced someone that I could sell. That's how desperate my wife was at the time to move out of Brooklyn. Stan, I am not a salesperson, right? I'm optimistic, but not that optimistic. So, so I would do these sales calls, and I would fail horribly. We had uh, we were herding goats, we were um, sequestering geese, and we had this baby, and it was all on me. So it was easily the most pressure tested part of my life. And fortunately, at the end of not selling any subscriptions to a marketing database, uh, the client called up and said, "We need you to build an information network at Bell South." And I went from just one check away from never getting up again from a checking account to having a pretty substantial income for a number of years. So that was a lifesaver. That was going to be my destiny. Of course, it became feast and famine. The contract was not renewed after a couple of years of some really well earning periods. And so I basically went another year without a paycheck. And it did not help that I was living in Western Massachusetts, 2 hours away from uh, Fairfield County, 2 hours away from Boston. Basically, that stage of my career, I slept on a lot of couches. Um, Eventually, that evolved into needing to take a second place because there was nothing near Western Mass. So that became the sort of that steel in your gut, and it'll all be okay when it's over. And that was the trial by fire part of my life, and it really makes coming into this full circle of all those experiences just a feeling of great humility and gratitude. And I super appreciate you letting me testify uh, and pointing the binoculars at my own journey. It's something I tend to not do or think about very often.
What would you say was a highlight of your career?
I'm having it.
That's great.
So you were at the talk. I'll try to be brief. So um, we hear about how AI is going to replace us all. Um, Maybe in a more measured sort of panic, we hear how AI is a parlor game. It's a prediction machine. It absolutely is. That there's no denying it. And it makes it sound like it's taking away all the discovery and it's snuffing out all the creativity and all the things that we humans do that machines cannot do. And Stan, I'm living proof that this is not the case. That if you have a hunch, if you have an inclination about being able to take data and and reformat that data in a way that not just cleans it, not just makes it consumable, but actually tests hypothesis about, it's not a platitude, it's actually a fact trail. There's empirical evidence that we didn't just say we did a good job. There are statistics. They can be disproven. We are accountable. So all of this arduous baggage that humans have been carrying around, which has devolved into the fake news quandary, This is the the total um, sort of distillation of how to clean the fake news up and how to make it not just plausible, but to make it provable. So you do this experiment in your kitchen, you're going to come out with similar outcomes. You may not agree with the conclusion, but but the fact trail is sound. Or it's not. We made it all up before we ever invented AI. Shouldn't trust us. So I do that through a reporting cycle called ESG. So that's all the environmental stuff. It also began to wear a very decidedly DEI kind of emblem uh, during the Biden administration. As you can guess, that's been ratcheted down a bit. But the idea that our workplaces should be reflective of the greater culture
Hmm.
is still very much a part of where I work. And I'm very proud of that. Um, and I'm especially proud that I can use the AI technology to actually create structured data. We always hear about unstructured data, us scam people. We have it within our power to structure it. And there's a lot of good that can come from that.
What's a hobby or an interest that you enjoy?
I love to write songs. I am not a musician, and that frees me to fall on my face with a guitar around my waist. Um, I haven't gotten up enough guts to perform at an open mic. So, and I've had the same guitar now since 1990. Um, One of the great things about growing old and being someone who likes to collect documents is all those songs you wrote when you were in your 20s, they need a refresh. And I love the fact I can return to them and dress them up differently. And it has a whole new meaning to me now that I've had all these stumbles, that I've had all these wives, that I've lived all these lives. And now Patty's picking me up at 12:46 in the morning. Like, that's a song. And it's it's also really great to make your own music in the way you like your music to be heard. Um, I have quarrel with a lot of songwriters. I'm not a guy who enjoys stanza, verse, refrain. I, I'm not a. I don't enjoy the repetition. I like to sprinkle it with a lot of different changes. I like to really blend the tempos into something new. So it feels a little bit like inventing a form. I know that sounds pretentious as hell, especially since I don't know how to play guitar. But being a poor musician actually frees up that part of your creativity to really just re-engage um, how you want the music to wash over, how you want it to be understood by other people. Um, so that's my favorite thing to do. That's not a paying gig. I really look forward to retirement. And the reason I look forward to it is because I'm going to get to pay myself. I'm not going to have to convince someone that I have a history of technology degree from Hampshire College. So, so that feels really liberating. And I'm going to spend some time over at Hampshire. I really want the school to thrive. It came this close to going belly up 5 years ago. And so I'm really glad to be there cheering the hometown college.
Do you perform your songs for anyone?
So far for friends, but
Okay.
that's a living room kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of living rooms, I'm going to give you some free publicity. Uh, I was looking at the Fab Five website under your living room concert
Hmm.
link.
Yep.
You have a wonderful gal uh, in the name of Haley Reardon,
Yes.
who's coming in the spring. I
Yes.
just saw her in Northampton 2 weeks ago, and I saw her with a fada singer from um, Barcelona, and it was just gorgeous music and take your breath away beauty and astonishing. Just you'll really pat yourself on the back when you see Haley.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, you already mentioned reading. Do you like to read anything? And if so, what?
So I read entirely too much of the New York Times every morning.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure I'm better for it, honestly. I read the Free Press now. It's a little bit of a counterbalance, which I like. I go out of my way to find people I disagree with. I think that's very healthy for your intellect to do so.
Hmm.
And I think it's also healthy for the country. I just
Yeah.
think we should get really used to putting up with each other.
Yeah.
And I also think we should get used to moving past what we can't put up with
Yeah.
because it's not that important.
Right.
Um, the other thing I would say about reading, um, I I enjoy a good nostalgic romp into baseball in the post-war era. I can't put that down. Um, I do I do like oral histories. I do like first-person narratives, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. I find that that kind of writing is the most evocative for me.
What do you like to eat?
Besides corned beef,
Yeah.
I like corn. I will never turn down the opportunity to eat a form of corn. I would say the apex of my corn fixation is watching a movie with a bowl of not microwave, oil-based popcorn with some Nutri-Yeast, some garlic powder, and some shaker Parmesan. And that just sends me into the desert island place of what I would do for food.
Where is the best corned beef that you've ever had?
So my dad remarried, and his wife's dad owned a deli. It wasn't a kosher deli, but it was kosher style. He probably saved a few bucks, but he had the leanest corned beef, and he had the leanest pastrami, and that's saying a lot because we know pastrami doesn't come out into the world lean.
Right.
So the man knew how to slice a
Yeah.
cut of beef.
Yeah. So if I were to come visit you, where would you take me if we went out to eat?
I would take you to Gianni Figs, white tablecloth treatment in South Deerfield, far away enough from the noise of Northampton and Amherst, the big city stand. And it wouldn't be a typical stand kind of food. What's the word you use? The food,
Crawl?
the food crawl, because you would have to eat all your entrees there. It's not like we're going to be surrounded by a lot of other classy places where you slice the pie six ways. But I'll tell you, you could order a generous supply of appetizers, and your tapas treatment would be well served.
Oh. All right, moving on to music. What's a favorite song or musician or concert or album?
I grew up on Long Island. One of the great privileges of doing so was having a musician and a social philanthropist and a political activist and a folk singer who got all the other singers to sing with him for free to raise money for good causes. His name was Harry Chapin. And in my formative years, he was my guy. Um, After a while, I told you I'm refrain, chorus. He was a little bit conventional in terms of his
Hmm.
songwriting, but
Yeah.
in terms of moving the spirit artistically to do something fulfilling and also community affirming, that's ground zero for me. Um, as I got into teenage, guitar, what is cool. I hung out with the same guys I have reunions with, and we listened to heavy doses of all the bands nobody knew about. If they knew about them, we would stop listening to them. We just wanted to stay a step away from the crowd. And there are bands that still seem yet to be discovered, and we listen to them. So I guess we're still ahead of our time. Is the way to describe that. Um, we did get to see 10cc, which is a band that uh, was a lot more popular in Britain. True, we had never seen them growing up, and they just came to Westchester in the fall, and it was just great to be able to know every word to every song. Didn't need the lyric sheet, didn't have a memory lapse, and their singing was spectacular. It wasn't like they didn't have it in their breadbasket to project and to stay on pitch. It was very impressive.
What was the first record you bought?
The first record I bought was actually sent to me by the Columbia Record Club.
Mm-hmm.
So my difficult stepfather, one of his graces is he sent a very difficult letter to the Columbia Record Club. My son didn't sign up for you to send him a record that he doesn't want. So that record turned out to be a cool record. And it was Four-Way Street by Crosby, Stills, Nash and
Uh-huh.
Young. It had
Yeah.
just come out.
Mm-hmm.
And his daughter, my stepsister, was just all over Neil Young. I mean, he was a heartthrob, and she was 16 at the time, and so that was sort of an appetite that I had never had before. Was an older sister who knew rock, so it turned out to be a good experience to have that as my first record.
Now, was the concert you just mentioned the last one you attended, or have you been to another one recently?
Well, Holly was the last one a couple of weeks ago. We're very fortunate in the Pioneer Valley that we're between some major cities, and we have the reputation for being a very generous audience. The singer Ben Folds,
Mm-hmm.
he this is the ultimate tribute to how generous we are. He had his daughter, who, let's just say, she's not a natural at the piano. He had her warm up for him, not in Boston, not in New York, at the Calvin Theater in Northampton. And we were very polite.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
did not cheer. And then we saved all our oomph for Ben.
yeah,
So we get a lot of good performers, and
yeah.
some of them are pretty well known.
All right, moving to sports. What sports do you enjoy watching these days?
Yeah, so I don't have cable. And if I could buy the package on my phone to watch the NFL, I would say, I'm probably just going to find out by 7 o'clock when the West Coast games are over whether
Yeah,
the Rams have won or not. So
yeah.
that's the extent of it. I will watch postseason a little bit. It is an excuse to go over um, and couch surf with the guys,
Hmm.
uh, but it's not central to my enjoyment.
Okay. All right, what's a favorite athlete, team, or sports memory?
Oh. I would say my favorite athletes um, tend to be the ones that are more community minded, that they understand that they have a, a role model situation going on, and they don't hit you over the head with how generous they are. They just kind of build it into their profile. Um, and no one will ever accuse Muhammad Ali of shrinking violet syndrome. Uh, and yeah, he was obnoxious to a large degree. He also walked the walk, and he also blazed a trail as a role model. There were, outright shows of bravery in terms of his pacifism, in terms of his refusal to go into the army. I think of him as an historic American hero who happened to be an athlete. With all the other medicine going down, Stan. Um, and that's not to say I follow boxing because I don't, but I feel like his life was prolific.
How about a
Uh,
favorite sports memory?
Favorite sports memory. So we haven't talked about the Islanders. So we all know that the Islanders had a heyday, and it stayed for 4 Stanley Cups, and nothing before and nothing ever since. But I will tell you that the precursor to that run of cups was the time that they defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins down 3 games to 0. This had never happened in a 7 game series of any playoff series in any sport. And the 74-75 Islanders, led by legends like Eddie Westfall and Andre Saint Laurent, and it's even before like most of the cast that you remember from the Cup. That it's impossible to ever convey that sense of wonder, astonishment, and just awe at the result of that series. Um, it was lightning in a bottle.
Did you follow the Nets?
The Nets, as in the basketball
Yeah,
Nets.
the New York Nets.
Yeah, so I actually, uh, I'm going to get real obscure on you. So if we had 8 people listening, now we have three. My dad used to bring us to Island Garden, which existed before the Nassau Coliseum, and the Nets had uh, Rick Barry as like the guy who just saved them from not making the playoffs. They were not a good team. And you remember Rick Barry used to
Sure.
squat for his free
Yeah.
throws, and his percentage was in the high 80s every year.
Yes.
I ended up sitting down with Rick Barry's bio, thinking, now I get to be close to my hero. I couldn't stand the guy after I finished reading his bio. That I was still that did not ruin the New York Nets for me. It was just like, huh, didn't realize that came with the package. So, of course, I was a big Dr. J fan. Once the Nets were in the Coliseum, and they were the class of the ABA. But it all ended so quickly. It just kind of went.
Yeah. Well, I lived in New Jersey when the ABA started, and their original, before the Nets, they were the New
Right.
Jersey Americans,
I recall.
and they played in the Teaneck Armory. And I was
That's
probably one of 3 people to listen to their games on the radio. And
that's
then when
absolutely insane. Who was the coach?
I don't know who the coach was. I was not paying attention to that, but I do know that in 1974, the ABA came to St. Louis. And that's when I got involved working for the Spirits of St. Louis. And I got to see the New York Nets up close and personal many times that year, including
Uh,
getting to see Dr. J for the first time. It was quite a revelation. The coach then was Kevin Lockery,
Kevin Lockery. Yeah.
and the Nets were great, and they were the defending champs, and they defeated the Spirits all 11 games they played during the regular season,
I'm
74,
sorry, Stan.
75. But in the playoffs, they faced each other in the first round, and the Nets took the first game, and the Spirits took the next 4 and upset the defending champion Nets in a historic upset. It was
Were
just
you
one of
the
my great.
statistician?
I was statistician for the Spirits, so we got to witness them beating the Nets in the playoffs, which was the greatest thing they ever did.
Did you have to function as an official scorer, sort of an adjunct role to statistician? Like who keeps track of all the foul counts?
So the official scorer does that. There's a scorebook and there's
Okay,
an official scorer, and that's where the fouls are kept. My role was not official scorer for the Spirits. I mostly kept minutes played was my stat. And then sometimes I would run the 24-second clock, although it was the 30-second clock in the
that's
first,
right.
they had a 30 second, and then they switched to 24 the second year. But I did that sometimes, but mostly kept minutes played. And I also dictated the action to the play-by-play typist who sat next to me. So he would have to type in what was happening, and then they would run essentially a mimeo at halftime and hand out the mimeo to people. That's how we did it back then. There were no computers involved.
So you were like a play-by-play for the numbers of the game.
Right. I would say, who made the basket, who assisted, and from how far out he shot. And my friend sitting next to me would type that in on a typewriter so that there would be a record of. And every once in a while, then during the game, the refs might come over and consult the play-by-play typist to see, when something had happened, if they needed to reset the clock or go back and correct an error. And so one of the great moments that happened was when there was a double overtime game against Kentucky, and Hubie Brown was the coach of Kentucky, and there was a 24-second clock violation, but the refs didn't hear the horn go off. So play continued. The Spirits scored a basket, and they were taking the lead. And then Hubie ran onto the court, which probably should have been a technical foul, but he got them to stop the action and told them that the 24-second clock had gone off. So eventually the refs came over and checked on that, and they asked the 24-second clock operator, who was not me, that I was doing the other, and he said, yeah, it had gone off. So they went back and checked, when was the last basket, and then they reset the clock and they took the points off. And Rod Thorne was the coach of the Spirits at the time, and he blew a gasket over this, got a technical foul, and eventually came over and screamed at the 24-second clock operator for telling the truth. So it was quite a game.
Did it get picked up on the mic?
No, there was nothing picked up on the mic. But what was funny about that game is during that second overtime, Hubie came over to us at the scorers table and he says, "This is a hell of a game. I'd pay to see this one."
I just got asked him, what was your tone of voice when you're talking back to the typist? Are you like droning on in a monotone, or is there melody to your speech? Like,
Well,
what is that?
well, Mark, I had a history of being a play-by-play announcer when I was in high school, so I had probably inflected a play-by-play announcer's tone, and that was probably not needed, but probably that's how I'd called it. Yeah.
I hear there's a career in doing that kind of work.
Well, I when the Spirits came to town in '74, do you know who their play-by-play announcer was? It was Bob Costas.
Oh my
That
goodness.
was his first gig, and I was very
Wow.
envious. I was very envious because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Bob Costas, and here he was. He was 1 year older than me, and he had the job, and he went on to obviously great things. But that's where he got his first break.
Huh. I would have never guessed him. That one day I'm going to recall that and I'm going to totally forget that you're the one who told me the answer to that question.
We actually lived in the same apartment complex. Just another trivia note.
You got to have him on the Fab Five.
All right, I'll see if I can get him. We do go back. I can remember talking to him during the playoffs saying, Bob, people are turning off the TV announcer and turning on the radio play-to-play so they can hear your call of the game. So he was flattered to hear that. Um, Moving on to our final category, which is humor. Do you have a favorite comedian or a comedy film?
My favorite comedian is Dana Carvey. And the way I would explain that is he can strike your funny bone at two very improbable angles. So, on the one hand, you have the doctrinaire, authoritarian church lady, and then you see the way that she dances, and she's strutting, right? So that's a form of humor. I am defenseless against that kind of humor. Um, it strikes me so much more deeply than a joke that's aimed at your brain. Um, Favorite humor movie? Huh. I don't look in the comedy section. I'm gonna kick myself after we're done, Stan, because then it will come to me what that famous movie was. Um, I'll give you another movie thing going on in my head. So I love to pick up used DVDs and just play them randomly and know that it's not a streaming service and I have to watch it within a certain
Hmm.
time. And ended up with a film starring Gary Cooper, um, Fave. Gosh, I'm wandering down an alley, and now I'm going to have to look up the title. It came out in 1956. It's about a Quaker family living on the Indiana frontier during the Civil War, and they are living their um, their beliefs. They are pacifists. They refuse to be um, brought in to the either side of the conflict, and you could tell that there are temptations, there are corruptions, there are all kinds of sort of pieces um, of that external world that they don't fit into, where they have to figure out their stand. This was also, I believe, the debut of Tony Perkins
Oh,
as
wow.
Gary Cooper's son, who was
Mhm.
just extraordinary. And Reagan, when he was figuring out arms control with Gorbachev, made Gorbachev see this film to try to build some kind of empathy about how to exist in the evil world where the best offense is a good defense, kind of a mindset. And I just found that really telling, really fascinating, and didn't expect this kind of a message. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the rebels come over the hill. The man of the house has left to try to um, collect his son, who has been wounded in battle. And I'll leave it to your curiosity to find the name of the film.
Okay.
But but it's not a comedy.
Well, thank you. All right, time for a story. What kind of a story have you chosen to share with us?
Uh, well, I feel like um, between my mom getting a flat tire in Utah, um, and me liking what all these different things. I'm trying to think of something that stands on its own as a story. Um,
Well, it could be a turning point in your life. It could be a touching memory, a challenge you overcame, a great teacher that you had, unlikely situation you found yourself in.
yeah. Um, so I will say that I had 4 years um, in my 50s where I got to get on the Port Jefferson ferry out of Bridgeport and go down to visit my dad. From the time that my parents split when I was 7, I never really had any time alone with my father other than him tutoring me to pass um, the standardized test that we took in New York State. And my dad was a math guy. He did not pass that on. Um, so he ended up divorcing his second wife. He ended up having girlfriends. There was a particularly serious relationship. Everybody in the circle thought they're going to get hitched. It's inevitable. And one day, my dad is just driving down Sunrise Highway uh, in in Suffolk County, and it's this turbulent rainstorm, and he sees a person in a windbreaker who can barely um, shelter herself. He makes sure she comes over to him, and he gives her a ride, and they strike up a friendship. Um, this became this became his life. Was saving this person who was very vulnerable, what had a history of substance abuse and never had that kind of steady, guiding, stable love in her life that my dad provided. So, as far as what everyone thought my dad should do, it was the complete opposite tack he took. And he ended up becoming Nancy's guardian and drove her to all her methadone appointments when she was withdrawing, and would, you know, the day that she overdosed and died was his birthday, and she wanted to basically meet her dealer and wanted him to go do that. I mean, she was always a hazard to herself. Um, I won't say it's my good fortune. I will say after Nancy passed, I actually had 4 years where I could travel down on the ferry and spend the quality time with my father that I had never gotten to do growing up. So I felt bad that he was alone. I knew that uh, he was on borrowed time, and that was of his choosing. He did not take care of his health, and I think that was pretty much by design. But we had some great visits and some wonderful jokes. And he always looked at what I did on a computer and would shake his head and say, "You could never pay me to do something that boring." So that was the engineer talking to the
Yeah.
KM guy.
Yeah.
So that's my story, Stan.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark. And thanks for sharing everything in our conversation. I'll wrap up just by reminiscing a bit about our time together recently in Washington, where we met up at the KM World Conference, the annual Knowledge Management Conference, where I was setting up a table outside the main exhibition hall, and I just was expecting that people would drop by, sit down, and chat. And fortunately, a lot of people did. I actually get more out of conferences that way than I do by sitting in sessions and listening to
Sure.
most of the talks. So at some point, you came up and sat down next to me, and we started to chat. And I don't know exactly how we hit on the topic of baseball. Do you remember how we got to that?
I didn't even know the Fab Five had that picture of Lou Brock on the masthead. So
Well, we got
it,
into baseball, and the
dice were
next thing
loaded, Stan.
I knew that you were a match for me in remembering obscure baseball trivia. And we began to trade stories. And you know how it is when you meet somebody who's a kindred spirit, and if you bring up, the 64 World Series and they remember it and they can match you stat for stat and memory for memory, that's a good thing. That's pleasing because most of the time you bring that up and people will give you sort of a blank stare and they'll go, "How do you remember that?" And in our case, we were off and running back and forth on baseball history, and we probably could have gone on forever on that, and that was a lot of fun. And then we continued it at dinner later that night. So I want to thank you for that. It was a highlight of my time there.
The baseball is just so intertwined, isn't it? It's just tied into so much sense making and and experience, and it's not a trivia question. It's a basket of experience.
So I have to thank my father for, getting me into baseball when I was young, taking me to baseball games, and then I tried to pass that along. I think I succeeded with my son. He became a baseball player. So the tradition, whether he continues that on with his son, I think he will. I think his son will become a baseball player as well. So that tradition will live on. So Mark, thanks a lot for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate the time.
It was a great pleasure, Stan. I appreciate you so much, and you will always be at the center of my social network.
Thanks.